My name is Claire, and I was 28 when a single morning changed the way I looked at my family forever. The day began exactly as I had imagined for months. The little church glowed with soft morning light pouring through its colourful stained glass windows. I stood in a quiet room beside the sanctuary, gently straightening the tiny white christening outfit my baby boy was wearing. He looked peaceful in my arms, completely unaware that he was about to become the centre of a family storm. My husband Ethan walked over and smiled at me, the kind of smile that always settled my nerves. He kissed our son's forehead and whispered, "Today's about him, nothing else matters." I wanted to believe that. Our son's name was Benjamin. We had chosen it together after weeks of late-night conversations, searching for a name that carried love, hope, and a fresh beginning. It wasn't a random choice. It was our first decision as parents. And it meant everything to us. The only person who had never accepted it was my mother, Margaret. A few weeks earlier, she had casually suggested another name, insisting it sounded more successful and respectable. I smiled, thanked her for the opinion, and politely explained that the decision had already been made. She didn't argue, and eventually she changed the subject. I assumed she had finally respected our choice. Looking back now, I realized she had simply stopped arguing because she had already started making another plan. The church slowly filled with relatives, family, friends, and neighbours who had watched me grow up. Everyone greeted us with warm smiles and congratulations. The atmosphere felt peaceful, filled with quiet conversations, flickering candles and gentle music echoing through the old building. Standing near the baptismal font, I took a deep breath and held Benjamin a little closer. This was supposed to be one of the happiest memories of our lives. I had no idea that within the next few minutes, someone I trusted most would stand in front of everyone and turn our beautiful celebration into a moment none of us would ever forget. The priest smiled warmly and invited us to step forward. Ethan gently rested his hand on my shoulder as we walked toward the front of the church. Every pair of eyes followed us, but I wasn't nervous anymore. I was simply excited to celebrate our son's special day with the people we loved. Then a chair scraped loudly against the floor. I turned and saw my mother rising from the front row. At first I thought she wanted to read a prayer or offer a blessing. Instead, she walked confidently to the microphone near the altar before anyone could stop her. The quiet conversations disappeared. With a bright smile, she looked around the church as if she were the host of the event. "I've been waiting to share this wonderful news," she announced. A few guests smiled politely, expecting something heartfelt. Then she said the words that made my heart sink. "Today, our little Nathan will officially receive his name." For a second, I couldn't even breathe. Nathan? That wasn't my son's name. I stared at Ethan, hoping I had misunderstood. His confused expression told me I hadn't. Before either of us could react, my mother continued speaking as though everything had already been agreed upon. She explained that she had always believed Nathan was a stronger name, one that would bring respect and success. She spoke with complete confidence, never once looking in our direction. Then my aunt walked down the aisle carrying a basket wrapped in blue ribbon. Inside were small gift boxes. They were handed to family members sitting near the front. Curious guests opened them one by one, revealing tiny keepsakes engraved with the letter N. Soft whispers spread through the church. Some relatives looked confused. Others simply assumed Ethan and I had changed our minds without telling anyone. That was exactly what my mother wanted them to believe. Weeks earlier, while I thought the subject had been settled, she had secretly called relatives, ordered personalized gifts, and convinced everyone that the baby's name had been changed. She had planned every detail so that, standing in front of all these people, I would feel too embarrassed to correct her. She believed I would stay silent. She didn't know that something inside me had already begun to change. For a few long seconds, I didn't move. The church was so quiet that I could hear my son's soft breathing against my shoulder. Every guest seemed frozen, waiting for Ethan or me to say something. My mother stood proudly beside the microphone, smiling as though she had just given everyone wonderful news. She expected me to stay quiet. She expected me to smile for the pictures, finish the ceremony, and deal with my feelings later. She didn't know I was done letting other people make decisions for my family. I handed Benjamin to Ethan for just a moment and slowly walked toward the front of the church. My footsteps echoed across the stone floor, and every step made the room feel even quieter. When I reached the microphone, I looked at the priest first. "I'm sorry," I said politely. "Could we pause the ceremony for just a minute?" He nodded gently and stepped back without saying a word. Then I turned toward everyone gathered inside the church. "I need to clear up something important," I began, keeping my voice calm even though my heart was racing. "My husband and I never changed our son's name." A wave of whispers swept through the room. I looked directly at my mother. "His name is Benjamin. It has always been Benjamin, and that's the name he will carry today." Her smile disappeared. She quickly stepped closer to me. "Claire, don't make this into a scene," she whispered through clenched teeth. "I'm only trying to help. You'll thank me one day." I slowly shook my head. "No, Mom, this isn't help." I pointed toward the gift boxes resting in everyone's hands. "You ordered those without asking us. You told our family a story that wasn't true. You tried to pressure us into accepting your choice by announcing it in front of everyone." She crossed her arms, refusing to admit she had done anything wrong. "I knew you would eventually realize I was right," she replied confidently. "Sometimes parents have to make difficult decisions." I couldn't believe what I had just heard. I wasn't looking at someone who regretted her actions. I was looking at someone who honestly believed she had the right to replace my decision with her own. I took a slow breath before answering. "You already had your chance to raise your child," I said quietly. "Now it's my turn to raise mine." The words hung in the air. The silence inside the church felt heavier than any argument. No one rushed to defend my mother anymore. The confidence she had walked to the microphone with was slowly fading. She looked around the room, searching for someone to support her, but the faces she met were filled with discomfort instead of agreement. That was when Ethan stepped forward. He placed one hand gently on my back and held Benjamin securely in his other arm. His voice stayed calm, but every word carried quiet strength. "Margaret," he said, "we've always wanted our son to grow up surrounded by love. But love doesn't mean making choices for someone else. Claire and I are his parents. Every important decision about his life belongs to us." His words echoed through the church. The priest gave a slow nod before speaking. "I believe this child has already been given a name by the people God entrusted to raise him," he said kindly. "Our responsibility today is to honor that decision, not replace it." Several guests quietly nodded. One by one, relatives who had accepted the engraved gifts placed them back into the basket without a single word. No one wanted to be part of something that had clearly crossed a line. My mother's shoulders slowly dropped. For the first time that morning, she looked uncertain. "I only wanted what was best for him," she said softly, avoiding my eyes. I took a deep breath. "I don't doubt that you love him," I answered. "But loving someone doesn't give you permission to control their life. If you truly wanted the best for Benjamin, you would have trusted his parents instead of trying to embarrass them." She didn't respond. There was nothing left to argue. The truth had already spoken louder than either of us ever could. The priest smiled gently and looked toward Ethan and me. "Are you ready to continue?" I looked at my husband. He smiled, and this time I smiled back. Together we walked to the baptismal font, carrying our son between us. The peaceful feeling that had disappeared earlier slowly returned. As the holy water touched Benjamin's forehead, the priest proudly spoke the name Ethan and I had chosen together. Benjamin. Hearing that single word filled my heart with relief. The church answered with quiet smiles instead of awkward whispers. The ceremony finally became what it had always been meant to be, a celebration of our son, our family, and the promise we had made to protect him. As I looked down at Benjamin sleeping peacefully in Ethan's arms, I knew the hardest conversation of the day wasn't completely over. It was only beginning. No one spoke. Even the people who had silently supported my mother lowered their eyes, realizing this had never been about a name. It had always been about control. When the ceremony ended, the tension that had filled the church slowly disappeared. Guests gathered around us with warm smiles, but this time their congratulations felt genuine. Several relatives quietly admitted they had believed my mother's version of the story because she had sounded so certain. They apologized for not questioning it sooner. I simply smiled. "You don't owe me an apology," I told them. "The only thing that matters is that Benjamin's day ended the way it should have." One by one, they welcomed our son by his real name, and hearing it spoken with love erased the pain of everything that had happened only minutes before. Across the room, my mother stood alone near the last pew. She looked smaller somehow, not because anyone had embarrassed her, but because her own choices had finally caught up with her. For a moment, our eyes met. She slowly walked toward us. "I know you're upset," she said quietly. "I thought I was protecting my grandson. I never imagined things would turn out like this." I looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Mum, protecting someone and controlling them are two different things. You raised me the way you believed was right. Now it's my turn to raise my son. You don't have to agree with every decision Ethan and I make, but you do have to respect them." She lowered her eyes. For the first time that day, she didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She simply nodded. It wasn't a perfect apology, and it didn't erase the hurt. Trust isn't rebuilt in a single conversation. It takes time, honesty, and changed behavior. But it was the first real step. As Ethan gently placed Benjamin into his stroller, he looked at me and smiled. "You were incredible today," he whispered. I squeezed his hand. "I wasn't trying to win an argument," I replied. "I was protecting our family." We walked out of the church together into the warm afternoon sunlight. The bells rang softly behind us while Benjamin slept peacefully, completely unaware of everything that had happened around him. Looking at his tiny face, I realized this day would never be remembered because of an argument over a name. It would be remembered as the day Ethan and I proved that our family would always stand together. From that moment on, I made myself one quiet promise. No matter who disagreed, no matter how difficult the road became, every important chapter of my son's life would be written by the people who loved him most, his parents. And as we drove away with Benjamin safely between us, I finally felt something I hadn't felt all morning: peace.